This morning I'm talking with Scott Powers as part of our ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science DVD series. So welcome, Scott. Thank you for coming. One of the things I just wanted to start with was where you grew up, where you went to high school. Were you interested in sports then? And then after that, you went to college. And where did you go and what did you major in? That type of thing.
Yeah, Jack, I grew up in a small town in the coal mining region of southwestern Virginia, a town of about 2,000 people. I got interested in athletics and actually in Little League Baseball, and it carried me through high school. I was a small running back, not so good in high school football, but had much more talent as a distance runner. So I went to a small liberal arts school, Carson Newman College in East Tennessee, and was a small college track athlete, and that's how I really got interested in exercise biology.
And what year was that, Scott, that you went?
Yeah, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 1972.
Okay.
And because I was a mediocre small college distance runner, I became very interested in the biology of performance and why everybody could beat me.
So I was a sort of a PE major too, so it was sort of a general, you maybe had one exercise phys class. And
yeah, exactly. It wasn't a very strong science undergraduate background at all. And in fact, when I left my undergraduate program, my goal was to get a master's degree and become a collegiate track coach. Because I wanted to apply exercise science, exercise physiology to the science of coaching. But somewhere along the way in the master's program, I fell in love with research. And
now, where did you go for your master's?
At the University of Georgia in Athens.
Okay, so right out of...
Right out, directly.
Okay.
And I was a graduate assistant in track. And so that basically, one of the ways I think to identify a career path is to identify what you don't want to do. And by being a graduate assistant in track, I realized I did not want to do that.
This is not the life. I was a soccer coach for a while, and it took me 2 years to realize this is not what I want to do. So had you at your master's level then sort of focused in on exercise physiology?
Indeed, I had, yes.
Okay.
You know, when I went there, I was broadly interested in biomechanics and various other aspects of movement and exercise
that you had
physiology.
been introduced to as an undergrad.
Exactly,
So,
and you know, because of the field events and the jumping events, there's a lot of biomechanics there, not just physical training. So I thought as a track coach, I was going to need to have a broad background in both biomechanics and exercise physiology. And of course, as you know, in those days, the fields were really in their infancy.
Yes, yeah.
Markedly different than what we're doing today.
Yeah, you knew it. You could know everybody, basically.
Absolutely.
So were you, did you study with a particular faculty member in a lab there, too?
Yeah.
For your master's?
There was only one person in exercise physiology at the time, a woman by the name of Vincent. And unfortunately, during my tenure there, she developed terminal cancer.
Oh,
and so the laboratory basically shut down my last semester I was there. And I actually wound up writing a historical master's thesis on the history of interval training.
Oh, really? And wow, I need to look at that.
Well, I don't think you would want to look at that, Jack. It would be an embarrassment for you to see it. But nonetheless, it was all about my interest in exercise biology and, you know, what kind of training stimulus would promote the greatest adaptation and improvement in performance.
So this was an MS?
This was an MS, yeah.
Okay. Now, so then did you go straight away again to...
No, naively at the time, many people encouraged me to get some public school teaching experience before going on at that time.
I tried that too.
And so I spent 3 long years in the public schools trying to save money to go back to graduate school.
Teaching PE, coaching?
Indeed, I was doing both. And I enjoyed the kids, but I knew for sure that was one more thing on my list that I did not want to do for the rest of my life.
Was this in Georgia?
It was in Georgia, in Atlanta, and I actually did research with the kids in my class. We would do little training studies, and this was before the days of IRB, so I didn't get any
no release forms.
No release forms, but the kids seemed to enjoy it, and they were all training-related studies about their improvement in simple field-based performance tests. And so from there, I went back to graduate school at the University of Tennessee.
Oh, okay. Was Ed there then?
Indeed. Ed Howley was my major professor.
Oh, fantastic.
Hugh Welch Henry Montoy was
Yeah.
there when I
Andy
got there.
Kozar was
Andy
there.
Kozar, indeed. Don Franks.
Great. Wow, that's a good lineup right
Yeah, it
there.
really was. It was, in my view, it was an ideal place for me to go at that stage in my career. And Jack, I'd had really no basic science background. And so it startled me naively, I was very naive, that they told me you have to go back and take general chemistry and organic and physics and calculus, which, you know, after taking those courses, I realized, of course, this is the language of science, so
Yeah, this
I
is
needed to do this.
an awakening, isn't it?
It really was, yeah.
What year was that you started at Knoxville?
Yeah, it was in 1977.
Okay.
And I finished a degree there in 1980. They were in the College of Education.
Boy, that's moving.
It was a 3-year program at the time.
So that was an EDD program.
It was indeed.
Okay.
There was no Ph.D. in the
Okay.
college.
Wow.
There were really no education courses involved, but
Just happened to be where it's located.
indeed. And so when I finished, I attempted to get a postdoc. Wasn't very competitive. Made an alternate list at both St. Louis at WashU and at the University of California, Santa Barbara at the Institute of Environmental Stress.
Oh, both great places.
But didn't get either one of them.
Would that been with Halosy at
Indeed.
in St. Louis?
He had a training grant even then. And Steve Horvath, of course,
Yes, of
in
course. Yeah.
Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
So, having failed to get a postdoc, I took a job at Louisiana State University, was there for 2 years, but got a summer sabbatical, if you will, to go to the Institute of Environmental Stress to get a mini postdoc, if you will. Having spent the 2 months there, I realized that if I'm going to be competitive in the rest of my career in science, I need some additional training. So I come back at the end of that summer and announce to my wife that I need to go back to graduate school to get a real Ph.D.
Our
in
careers are very
physiology.
similar, I'll tell you later. But
I never do anything right the first time. So
wow, that's another career
I
change.
resigned my position at LSU and remained there in the Department of Physiology and got a Ph.D. and finished that in
Fantastic.
1985.
Wow.
Then went back on the faculty in kinesiology at LSU until December of '88, and I then moved to the University of Florida, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's quite a career.
Well, it's not a straight route for sure.
And so, when you went to Gainesville, that is where it is?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
I get some of these mixed
Please
up.
don't say Tallahassee.
No, I knew better than that. But anyhow, so were you hired just there as a chair of the department, or?
No, I went there as a faculty member, as an
Okay.
associate professor. And at the time, Michael Pollack was on the
Oh,
faculty.
of course, yeah.
And it was
Perfect.
really, Bob Singer was the
I
department
remember
chair.
him. Yeah.
And they were trying to build a program at the time, and I thought, you know, this is a chance to be on the ground floor of something that might become pretty good.
Was this a kinesiology department then?
It was
or
called
whatever they were
exercise science
called?
at the time, yeah.
Okay.
But it had been, back in its history, a physical education program that
Sure.
went through all the evolution.
Yep. Yep.
And we're sort of unique there. We're in a self-contained college
Oh,
called
nice.
the College of Health and Human Performance.
Very nice. You
Yeah.
have your own dean.
Indeed. And there are only 3 departments, and our department is now morphed from exercise science to applied physiology. And virtually 95% of our undergraduates want to go to medical school.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
changed markedly.
Yeah.
No pedagogy. It's a very, very focused faculty in biomechanics, exercise physiology, motor control.
Okay. So I would imagine then you have and probably enjoy a fairly large contingent of graduate students.
Yes, indeed. In fact, I think we've got about 20 PhD students in our program right now.
Wow.
But we have 10 faculty members in exercise physiology.
I had no idea it was
Yeah.
that big.
Yeah, we've
there.
grown a great deal.
Wow. And do you, how many are working with you then?
Yeah, I've had the most now I've ever had in my whole career. And it happened sort of by mistake over time, but I actually have 6 PhD students.
Wow,
But
that's a lot of,
most of them are very close to finishing.
yeah. So we didn't touch on it yet, and I don't know where it happened. You can tell me. Somewhere along the way, you discovered ACSM.
Yeah. In fact, I joined as a graduate student in 1977, attended my first national meeting in 1978, and it was an eye-opener. It was in Washington, D.C. It was a much smaller version of today's
Yeah, oh, I
meeting,
bet,
about
yeah.
500 people. But I was just awestruck by seeing these names that I had read for many years in the literature, seeing them present, seeing them in person, seeing that they were, you know, human beings that you could actually talk to.
Right. Is this when you were at
Tennessee.
Oh, so it was when you started the Ph.D. program.
Exactly.
And not at Carson Newman or
No,
Georgia?
indeed. And in fact, I'm embarrassed to say I was naive. I didn't know the American College of Sports Medicine existed when I was an undergraduate.
Yeah, okay. And of course, going to Tennessee, there's a long tradition there of ACSM involvement.
Indeed, yes. And Henry Montori was president, Ed Halley was president.
Yeah. So, okay, so when did you do your first paper?
Yeah, so I guess my first publication was in 1980.
Okay.
And it was an independent research project I'd done prior to my dissertation at Tennessee. It was a very simple study looking at fat metabolism differences between men and women.
Did you present at the annual meeting?
Indeed, I did. I'm embarrassed to tell you, I don't remember the exact year, but
well,
it might have been,
it can be close.
yeah, 79 or 80 maybe.
So almost when you joined?
Yes,
really?
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I guess I've been a member for 34 years now.
That's what Stella was saying. She had just gotten a paperweight or something. She couldn't believe it was 25 years for her.
Yeah.
So you're past 30 right
Yes,
now.
indeed.
So maybe you could comment on that a little bit, because here you're giving a paper, you're starting a PhD program, now you're running a PhD program. A long time passed there. What has ACSM done for you then?
Yeah.
And how?
Well, obviously it was my first professional organization, and basically it was a platform for me to continue to learn and to meet people and to network. And the ACSM, I think one of the strongest things that they do is provide this educational platform by the annual meeting and the regional chapter meetings,
Right.
whereby it's continuing education and stimulation for both faculty and students along the way. And I think it's a wonderful place for students to come and just be excited or turned off by research.
Yeah.
But regardless of what happens there, it's an important decision-making, part of the decision-making tree. Either you love this or you don't like it.
It's sort of like your own career. and
Exactly.
This is not what I want to do.
Exactly.
So all the time then you would have been involved with what, Southeast chapter?
Indeed. In fact, I became a member of the Board of Trustees of Southeast in the early 80s, was president in the mid-80s, and have continued to go to that meeting every year for 30 years.
Wow.
And we've grown now, the Southeast chapter, we had almost 800 people attending the previous meeting.
I think it used to be the Texas chapter that was so big, but you guys must be the largest, I would think.
You know, I think it must be now.
I would think
At
so.
one time, the Southwest, I think, was very large.
Yeah.
But the
yeah.
Southeast, one of the unique things about it is that the senior faculty continue to go and support that meeting. I think oftentimes people get busy later in their career and they let the regional chapters attending another meeting sometimes go. That hasn't happened in the Southeast.
And I was looking through my list, and the time flies so fast, but you've won a citation.
I was very fortunate to be selected for a citation.
You were a Dill lecturer.
Fortunate again.
So that's coming a long way in this group.
Well, yeah, and you know, I've been involved in ACSM in committee forums, and I was a trustee and a vice president, but ACSM has given me far more than I've given it. And the educational opportunities, I was involved in both of the integrative physiology of exercise program committees and was fortunate to chair the last one.
I was going to say, the one that you guys had in Washington, was it in Washington, D.C. last year, or was that the first?
The first was actually in Indianapolis.
Okay, I was thinking one was in D.C., I guess.
We've only had two. The first was in Indy, the second was in Miami.
Okay.
We had about 550
It was the
people.
Miami, yeah. I just keep hearing about that. I mean,
You know, we had
it
great
was a
fun doing it.
landmark.
And, you know, the evaluations for the attendees were extremely positive. And I don't think they were just talking about South Beach. I think they enjoyed the sights.
One of the perks of going to Miami.
But indeed, I think it was a good venue.
Yeah, and there were like 500 plus, I think.
550 people
Yeah,
there.
that's really
Yeah, we had
significant.
a full 3-day meeting.
Now, you chaired both of those then?
No, George Brooks chaired the
George
first one.
did, okay.
It was Tim Mush, George Brooks, and myself as co-chairs. And then the last one, George Brooks was also a co-chair, and I was the chair.
Okay.
But we had a large program committee of about 15 people, so we got a lot of input from diverse interests.
Now, was that part of, was ACSM sponsoring that?
Indeed,
or how
yeah.
did that all work?
Yeah, so this, I won't say it was a brainchild of mine, because I don't think that was the case, but it came out of the Research Advisory Committee, which I chaired for several years for ACSM. And the feeling was that the American Physiological Society had started a meeting, a small, focused exercise physiology meeting on the basic science of exercise physiology. That had been extremely successful by all benchmarks, and they were having this every 4 years. And I felt like that ACSM could profit from the same kind of meeting, that we would host one for every 4 years, but alternate it between the APS, so there'd be 2 years between them.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously starting a new meeting is not easy, and we launched the first one about the time the economy started to take a nosedive. And then the second one, of course, the economy was still down.
Yeah.
But I think we did very well, and I think it fills a need that the basic science membership of ACSM appreciate.
Tell me a little bit about your lab and your research and your funding, and you must have a pretty big operation.
Well, it's not a huge operation. I guess everything is relative in
Yeah,
terms of
true.
research, but
Yeah.
my work has been funded by the NIH and American Heart, American Lung Association for a number of years. And I started out with, after my EDD at Tennessee, running people on treadmills and pulling blood samples and measuring the things that you could measure in human beings. And one of my reasons for wanting to go back to graduate school is to become more mechanistic, to understand what's taking place in skeletal muscle. And so, long story short, my work is focused on the role of reactive oxygen species, free radicals, and how they act as signaling or damaging molecules in both cardiac and skeletal muscle myocytes, both during exercise and during prolonged periods of inactivity. And much of the focus has been on health-related issues, not so much performance for many years now.
So I went to the session the other day on sitting, basically, and for a little I can put together from what you just said, some of your research is going to be key.
Inactivity is not good for your health.
Yeah, yeah.
Indeed. And what I actually study is a unique form of muscle wasting. And it stemmed from my interest in respiratory physiology. I studied gas exchange and regulation of breathing during exercise in humans and in animals all through the 80s. But decided to make a hard right turn and move to the pump side of the system, the respiratory muscle. And that's when I got interested in the redox signaling and the various diseases that impact respiratory muscles. So one of the things that really struck me is in the middle 90s, I read a paper that frankly I didn't believe, that argued that when you put patients on mechanical ventilation, you know, a patient that has to undergo surgery and can't ventilate on their own, or a patient that presents in the ICU with acute respiratory distress or lung injury or respiratory failure, they have to be put on a ventilator in order to be able to, a life-saving intervention.
Right.
But what happens is the machine does all the work for the breathing muscles, so they become completely inactive. So this paper argued that in as short as 48 hours, these breathing muscles could waste up to 50% of their original size. And the clinical significance of that is that weaning patients from a ventilator is a huge clinical problem.
Yeah, once they're on it.
They have trouble separating them. And sometimes patients are never weaned.
Yes.
So, frankly, I didn't believe this was true. I thought that these investigators had made a big mistake, that these animals during the experiments had become infected and developed sepsis. And it was a sepsis-induced wasting.
Yeah.
So I set it up on to replicate that and demonstrate that it was a sepsis problem. So lo and behold, I replicated their findings in animals that with culture, I knew were not infected. And I became absolutely passionate about this. And this has consumed my research agenda for the last 16 years.
Yeah.
Understanding why this is the case. And the whole idea is by trying to understand the mechanism, by identifying a biological target, then you're going to be able to intervene before the problem happens.
As a historian, certainly not a physiologist, I've always thought Larry Rowell's book on the CV system was just
absolutely
classic.
Superb.
Am I right?
Superb, absolutely,
Yeah.
And it really shows throughout the book his very linear and critical thinking about what are the questions, what are the problems, and how do we answer them.
And that was pretty much ahead of its time, I
Oh,
think,
for sure.
you know.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how are we doing? Oh, great. So, I see your name on textbooks.
Unfortunately, that's true. Yeah.
Well, how did that all get started? And
Well, it's a long story, but I'll make it short.
well, you don't have to be real short, but
I was an assistant professor at LSU, and the department chair was an exercise physiologist as well, and he'd been approached by a developmental editor to write an exercise physiology book. He needed a co-author.
okay.
So, of course, he had his thumb on a young assistant professor, and I knew it was the wrong thing to do, but I said yes. So we worked on this thing off and on for 2 years. The target was to finish it in 3. And so I had written bits and pieces of 5 or 6 chapters, and he walks into my office one day and he says, I just can't do it. I'm going to quit. Can't finish the book. So being stubborn and somewhat determined, I said, okay.
Wow.
And I asked Ed Howley if he would be interested in being involved. We started fresh, and the rest is history.
Wow.
4 or 5 years later, we published the first edition.
Yeah, who was that with?
Originally, it was with William C. Brown.
Right, I
And
remember
in the
that.
publishing business, as
Yeah.
you know, it's morphed several times,
Yeah.
and it's now with McGraw-Hill.
Okay, and your 4th edition? 5th?
Actually, we've just finished the revision of the 8th edition.
8th? Oh,
Hard to believe.
wow. Have you done other books then, too? Or?
Yeah, I actually made another bad decision a few years ago with one of my colleagues, Steve Dodd, and we wrote a fitness wellness book that's now in its 5th edition,
Oh, my heavens.
and it's with Pearson Publishers.
Wow. And others?
No, those are the only ones.
Those are
3.
the 2.
There were
Or
2.
3.
There were 2 fitness-related. One's a big one, and one's a scaled-down version.
Okay.
3's enough. I think when you make the same mistake 3 times, it's time to say no.
And have you been involved with the fitness summits at all, the health and fitness summits? Or?
Not in a big way. You know, people don't think of me, I think, in terms of a fitness-related person, although that's how I got interested in this business, and
Yeah,
I'm really keenly
And
interested.
most people did.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, and the amazing thing is that, you know, we now know that exercise causes skeletal muscle to become an endocrine organ that probably communicates with a whole host of other organ systems that derive this overall benefit that we get from exercise. And I think this is a very exciting time to be in
Yeah.
exercise biology.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, did Hallie recruit you to work with him on the Health and Fitness Journal? Or?
You know, I'm on the editorial board,
Okay.
and I appreciate that journal a great deal. I think
Yeah.
its readership, this is an important way to communicate with those folks.
Yeah, I
and
think so.
they do a superb job.
Yeah.
And I wrote a little review a couple years ago, and the critiques, I mean, I've never seen as many revisions, and they really work hard on getting the message to the appropriate audience in the appropriate way. And you know, sometimes as scientists we get accustomed to writing to our audience, and we lose the ability to communicate with a broader audience, and they kept me on task.
Yeah, where the fitness person goes, now just what does that mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, and what do I do with
Exactly.
this? Yeah. Well, it's sort of in the last little bit here, and again, you've been in ACSM a long time, and one of the things I'm trying to ask everyone is where ACSM is now and your sort of perspective on it. Are we doing the right thing? Are we at the right place at the right time? Trying to do too much? Should we go off in other directions? Where do you see things?
Yeah, you know, certainly when I joined ACSM as a graduate student in 1977, it was a very concentrated group of primarily people in exercise physiology. It's grown enormously. The sports medicine side of things have grown hugely, and the fitness side of things and wellness has been certainly the largest part of that expanding market. And I frankly don't know if ACSM would have been better off to have remained a very focused exercise physiology group, allowing the sports medicine group to be separate, allowing the fitness people to be separate. But I think that you know, even though there is a diverse audience with ACSM, I think ACSM can actually serve all of those audiences.
Yeah, my bias is I think they're better that they changed.
Yeah.
You know, just when you're looking now at this issue of actually bringing physical activity, obesity to the public health realm.
No question about it.
Significant.
If the organization is going to have a positive impact on public health issues in this country, it's through that venue of exercise as medicine.
Yeah.
And I credit Bob Salas with, he was president the year that was launched, and I think that that's become a buzzword around the world, is that exercise is medicine.
Yeah.
And now we have the evidence to show why that's the case. I mean, we've had for years epidemiological studies, but now we have the biology as to why adipocytes synthesize and release compounds that cause arthritis.
To be able to explain all
absolutely,
that is just crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a time really in the 80s where many basic scientists believed that the exercise zealots were just designing experiments to try to demonstrate exercise is good for you without a sound biological explanation as to why this was the case. But now the biology's caught up.
Yeah, I remember reading about and writing about T.K. Cureton.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the battles that were waged. I mean, people still thought he was going to drop dead from running too much.
I love this classic picture of seeing him in the cemetery running.
Yes, I know that one. Yeah,
with
running
the caption,
by those who
his detractors.
That's a classic.
And you know, he set world records in swimming until almost
an age group.
In the 80s.
Yeah, just a perfect example of practicing what he preached.
Absolutely.
So anyhow, Scott, I told you it would go fast.
Yes, indeed, Jack.
And I thank you so much for.
Thanks for the invitation. It's been an honor to have a chance to talk about ACSM and all that it's given me throughout my career.
Well, thank you.